folks, today we are going to be reviewing MOA by Ape Games.
MOA is a game that we picked up at last year's Gen Con in 2018, and you had heard about it, and I sort of watched it get played a little bit, but I hadn't played it at all. I didn't play it until we got back home. It's a pretty interesting game. It definitely combines worker placement as well as area management, resource control, all of that, and the mechanics of it are done with playing different cards. It's also one of those games that are very popular sort of right now, and I personally think are tough to do really well, where you're only allowed to make one or two choices every turn, but there are 4 or 5 choices that you can possibly do. And MOA does it well enough. This is a game that's difficult for me to play. Not just it's a game that I'm bad at or anything like that, but I find this to be a difficult game to play. I think it's very pretty, but it's honestly not one of my favorites.
So I find it's a little bit of a complicated game to learn. When I sat down at Gen Con to play a sample round, I kind of didn't really understand what was going on until we had played that first round. The first time you play, it's probably going to be a lot of guessing. It's not really you play one round and are like, okay, good, I'm set. There's definitely a learning curve to this.
Now, in general, what the game is about is that you play the birds, the native birds of New Zealand. And there are colonizing mammals, European colonizing mammals that are coming into New Zealand, and you're trying to deal with that, either by fortifying yourself or trying to fight them off. And there's even a mechanic where you ally yourself with them to the detriment of all of the other indigenous species. In all the times that we've played it, we've never seen anyone actually do that. I don't really particularly see the major benefit that comes from it. And no, neither has anyone else that we've seen do it. But that's sort of the idea behind the game.
I was a little hesitant when I first heard the premise of the game, just how well it was going to be handled. Was it going to come across as cringy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think my first response was, so it's Colonizers the game?
But they do a good job of, it's not like you're playing the birds, and I think also because they give information on what, some cool facts about the birds. A lot of them are extinct. They list if they're endangered as well, so there is a little bit of conservation undertones to it as well.
I think that that's really cool as well. All of the information about the different birds is nifty. The game itself is very pretty. I like that it's played in sort of 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2 of the game, and the mechanics of how you move around the board and the different areas that you need to be paying attention to are all done really nicely.
There's a nice element of luck in that each turn you draw 2 different landscapes, that those are the only places you can play in, so sometimes that works to your advantage. Sometimes you're like, well shoot, I don't want to play here, and I've been waiting to play in the forests for a really long time.
And it's definitely a game that you can pick a strategy. Are you going to try to be very aggressive and defeat the animals, and that's where your victory points are coming from? Or are you trying to hold as much land as possible, or do the sorts of things where you can just straight up buy victory points through your different actions? There's a lot of different strategies. I haven't found one that works particularly well for me. I kind of like trying to hunt down all of the invading species. But that's kind of neat because you can find your way of doing things. The luck is involved, and you really are playing against the other players. You're not attacking them, but it definitely is a everybody for themselves type game.
I like the card mechanic of how you get to choose what you are going to do. So you have a handful of cards that you get dealt out at the beginning of each phase, and you have those cards through that phase. There's not really much of a redraw mechanic except for some special cards you can buy. And you can choose to pass. So if there's not a terrain you want to do something in that particular round, you can pass. And if you run out of cards, you run out of cards. Yeah. And each of the cards have different symbols on them and different combinations of symbols on them. Yeah. So But you can only use one of the symbols when you play the card. So that's also a strategy to what cards you hold on to, what cards you play is what.
And if all of that sounded confusing, hearing us talk about it, it's just as confusing when you play the game. And it gets a little frustrating because sometimes the cards really look like, oh, this is my good warrior card, because it has a lot of those symbols and a couple of other, migration or defense or whatever. But you don't get to use them. Mm-hmm. My favorite thing that happens in the game is that there's a volcano. When the volcano terrain pops up, the little marker ticks up a little bit more, and the volcano area is worth a certain number of points, but if it erupts, then it's not worth anything. I think that's clever. I think it's funny. I think it's a neat little part of the game.
Yeah, and another interesting thing is that there is definitely slightly different strategies I've found for each of the phases. So the first phase and the second phase, because you clear most of the board of a lot of the things, but your birds still stay.
You're placing birds to try to have a population in an area and control it. But if you've built fortifications or if bad things have shown up, those go away in phase 2.
For me personally, I tend to, phase 1 is the get a lot of birds on the board, but keep a couple in reserve for phase 2. And then phase 2 is mostly the okay, just defend and pile things in to really secure which places I have the most population. Because you also can come in second place and still get points for an area. So that's a strategy to try and just get second place in a lot of different places.
Yeah, and whenever it's just Dawn and I playing against each other, I pretty consistently come in second place. You were really excited about MOA when you read about it going into it. I think we talked about it on our What We're Looking Forward to, Gen Con 2018. And you described it to me. You were really energetic and excited about the game. And we got home and we played it, and we immediately played it a second time because I had no idea what was going on. Mm-hmm. We've played this game fairly regularly, and I don't think that I've ever said I don't want to play MOA, but it's never my first pick. It really is. I think the game is overly complicated.
Yeah.
And it's not super smooth in a lot of its different mechanics. It feels clunky, and the game itself always feels like it takes longer than the actual number of minutes we spend playing.
That's fair.
It's a nice box. I like having it on our, I think, actually, if I move my head, there it is. It's right behind us. And it is absolutely a beautiful game. It really is. There's a couple of things that it does well, but I got to admit, it's not one of my favorite games.
Yeah, I think it's a solid area control game, but it's not if I want to play an area control game, I don't think it would necessarily always be my first choice. But if you enjoy birds and you like New Zealand, then this might be the area control game for you.
Absolutely. Have you played MOA? Do you think that it's great? Are we absolutely crazy and it's the best game that you've ever played in a respectful way? Let us know why in the bottom. Maybe we're just picking the wrong strategy. Maybe we don't really get it as well. That's cool. Let us know what you think about that game.
Thank you so much for watching. If you want to show your support, you can like and share this video with friends who you think might be interested in checking out MOA. We make videos here every Tuesday and Thursday, but don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any of our videos. A big thanks to our patrons, especially Sean. If you want to support our channel, you can head over to our Patreon page and check out the perks of being a patron.
So until next time, I'm Ryan.
And I'm Dawn.
And we're Roll for Initiative. Bye. I wasn't planning on saying how much I disliked the game. I just don't like the game.